come planning to speak today, but I'm glad I got to hear you talk about that issue, because that's very important. And if you can get it done on a bipartisan way, that would be great too. But the examples I've seen have all been on the other side. And it has cost us seats, and seats cost the non-ability to get things done versus trying to get things done. I'm running again for the 25th Congressional District. I've been elected since 1992. When I was first elected, we had a large class. It was a redistricting period. It was, in fact, the largest class in my time in Congress. We had 110 people elected, 47 Republicans and 43 Republicans, 67 Democrats. Then we won 5 special elections, and so we ended up picking up seats, and then that led into '94 when we won the majority. I was elected by my colleagues when I went there to, and we had a great class. We had former governor, former state legislatures, judges. It was a great group of people. Many of us have become chairmen in the conference. And I was elected president of the freshman Republican class. Then the next term we won the majority. And most of I was on the education committee. I became chairman of the subcommittee over higher education. Like Sharon, we have 6 children, and when our oldest was going into high school, we lived north in the Santa Cruz Valley, and there was talk about busing our kids down to the terrible San Fernando Valley. And so I ran for the school board. They had a special election. We had a 5-member high school board, and the majority were appointed. So when somebody left, they thought they better have an election instead of appoint another person. So we had 14 people running, and we would come to events like this, and all of us brought all of our friends, and so we had probably 20, 30 people in the audience, and we would get up, and all of us, 14 of us, fighting over the issue of we cannot bus our kids down to the San Fernando Valley. We had an election. I won. It was a landslide. I got 3% of the vote. It was a 9% turnout. School board elections are a lot more important than people think they are. And I went to my first school board meeting, and I found out you can't bus kids from one district to another. So 14 of us were running and not knowing a thing about the issues. It was an interesting experience. I spent the next 9 years trying to learn a little bit about how education worked. And it was a great experience. One thing I noticed, when I started, our budget was $16 million. When I left, it was $40 million. And we hadn't changed much the number of students. And most of that money, 85%, came from state and federal government. And I thought, what change have we made? The actual local school boards have very little authority because most of it, where the money comes from, that's where the authority comes from. And it was a great experience. I learned a lot about education. I got to see good things happening with children, and this was before charter schools, before vouchers, and not even much homeschooling. But there's been a big change, and people understand competition, and they understand that they have the responsibility for their children. And a lot of people are doing a great job of homeschooling, and charter schools have made a lot of impact, and vouchers politically are just like dead. You cannot have a voucher until you're 18 years old, then you can get a Pell Grant. That's a voucher. And I don't know what happens when you become 18, all of a sudden you're smart enough to pick your own school. We've got a lot of crazy problems. Then I had the opportunity a couple of years ago. I became chairman of the full education committee for just a short time, then we lost the majority. But John McKeon who was also in my class, was a ranking member on the Armed Services Committee, and I was getting ready to go to work one morning, and I saw the headline came across, John McKeon, the new Secretary of the Army. Wait, you know, that can't happen. He's our ranking member. And so about 5 minutes later, Jerry Lewis called and says, did you pay attention to the news? I said, yeah. And he says, you got to do something about that. So I got to the office of my staff. We're going to do this. So I went over to Boehner's office and I said, you know, I talked to you before about this, because when I went to the Congress, that's what I wanted to work on, was armed services. And I said, you know, I came before and asked you for advice. Now I'm telling you what I'm going to do, and I need your help. And it's a competitive process. You campaign just like everything else in this business. And then you go to the steering committee, which is comprised of members from our caucus representing small states, big states, regions, areas. And you need 17 votes. And I won, but Boehner told me afterwards, he says, when you first came, I didn't think you had a chance. But Mac Thornberry was competing, and he had just competed a couple months before against McKeon, and he made a great presentation. And but I did win, and I get to work with the best. I think I've got the best job in Congress. It's tough right now because of the huge cuts in defense. You know, as a party, we have followed Reagan's three-legged stool: social issues, fiscal responsibility, and the defense of our nation. And because we're in such serious financial problems, we have lost sight of, or we've gotten out of balance on those legs, and our stool is really wobbling right now. We're trying to pay for decades of financial problems in 1 year. And we are cutting this year over $1 trillion out of our defense budget over the next 10 years. And when people finally get the message of what's happening, I think they're going to rebel. This is not good. And I'm leading the fight to take care of this sequestration. When that hits in January, we're going through $487 billion in this budget right now. And sequestration will be another $500–600 billion. And that's with no thought. You just take the whole budget and go every line item and just take it out, 8 or 12%, depending on what they do with personnel. Which means that as the CNO, Chief of Naval Operations, said, how do you cut 8% of a ship? You know, there's no rhyme or reason, and everything the Pentagon does is through a contract, and on January 2nd, all of those contracts become null and void. We're going to have litigation, we're going to end up spending more money. It's ludicrous. So I have a bill to stop that, pay the first year, by reducing the size of the federal workforce. And every chance I get, I try to tell people, call your congressman. Down here in the valley, call Mr. Berman, Mr. Waxman, Mr. Sherman, tell them to get on that bill. That'll be very interesting. Thank you very much. Hope to have your support.